Holiness, the little matter that brought me here to the furthest edge of your light on earth is now settled. And the Indians are once more free to be enslaved by the Spanish and Portuguese settlers.
Some of you may remember the movie The Mission about 30 years ago. Algunos de ustedes recuerdan este video o cine. Hace más o menos 30 años ha ganado el Academy Award. But today I'm going to talk about the Jesuit Missions of Argentina, las misiones jesuitas de Argentina. Primero, algunos han preguntado algo. A few people have asked me just today a question about the glaciers, the Beagle Channel. When will we see the glaciers? Sobre los glaciares en el canal de Beagle. Vamos a ver los glaciares sábado en la mañana, más o menos a las 7 de la mañana. En el programa van a decir exactamente. And the program will tell us exactly what time we'll be passing the glaciers in the Beagle Channel. It'll be Saturday morning. Probably 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, but they'll give us an announcement, and Roberto will be giving the information on that. Actually, I'm not sure. Roberto may not be doing it. Somebody else may be doing it, but we will have somebody giving a narration as we go past the glaciers. But I'm going to start out with this talk about the Jesuit missions way back in 1493, 1494. Vamos a empezar con algo que ha pasado en 1494 93, when the Pope at that time divided up the world between the Portuguese and the Spanish, ultimately with the Treaty of Tordesillas that drew a line around the world. And for South America, what it did is it gave the Portuguese an access to a claim on the northeastern part of Brazil. En este Tratado de Tordesillas en 1494, el Papa ha marcado una línea entre los parte del mundo por los portugueses y por la parte del mundo por los españoles. Y entonces, con este tratado, los portugueses han recibido, han dado un derecho, un parte de lo que ahora es Brazil. So this is ultimately the Treaty of Tordesillas line that gives the Portuguese northeastern Brazil. On this map, what we have are two colors. The purple color there is an area that early in the Portuguese colonial period in Brazil became an area that was producing sugar using black slaves brought over from Africa. Parte arriba there es un parte de Brasil en cual los portugueses estaban cosechando azúcar, caña de azúcar, usando negros de África como esclavos. Y la otra parte, en ese color amarillo verde, fue otro tipo de agricultura usando como esclavos los indios, los nativos in esta zona. The other area there with the yellow-green is an area in which they were using Indian slaves rather than black slaves to do a variety of agricultural things. That's in 1635. Things had changed almost 100 years later. The area that is the lighter green there was the Portuguese colony, and the area at the top, the darker green, was Dutch. La parte sur es Portugués y la parte norte there con verde oscuro es lo de los holandeses. But the important thing for us is this area in here, that part of our story is going to be this area in the south where they were going to get the native Indians to be their slaves. Vamos a hablar más de esta zona en cual los portugueses estaban buscando nativos para esclavos para usar en sus actividades allá. This is also an early map, 1574, es un plano de 1574 de Perú, pero la parte importante por nosotros es la parte sur de este plano. The most important part for us is going to be the southern part. You can see Lake Titicaca and the other lakes of highland Bolivia there. Este es Lago Titicaca y otros lagos en el sur de Bolivia. Y this zona aquí, the very bottom part of this map, is the part that's going to be important for us to start out with. One thing we're going to do history here, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time with history. The Spanish arrived in the New World with Columbus, end of the 15th century. They conquered Mexico in the early 1520s. They conquered Peru in the early 1530s. And at that time, with the Spanish arriving in Mexico and Peru, were several different orders of Catholic priests, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Mercedarians, and so forth. Cuando los españoles han llegado en el Nuevo Mundo, con la conquista de México en los años 1520, Perú en los años 30, han llegado con los españoles varios grupos como los dominicanos, los franciscanos, Mercedians, etc. Los jesuitas fueron fundados en 1540, entonces después de la conquista de Mexico y Peru. The important thing here is that the Jesuits weren't founded until after the conquest of Mexico and the conquest of Peru, so they were not the early arrivals. And when they began to come to the Western Hemisphere, they were shoved off to the places nobody else wanted. That is to say, the other groups of priests already had claimed the good spots, and the Jesuits ended up in places like far north Mexico, Baja California, the jungle areas of Peru and Ecuador, in parts of southern Chile, and in our case, we're going to be talking about Argentina, the northwest of Argentina. Entonces los jesuitas han llegado después de la conquista y ellos han recibido derechos para sus trabajos en partes a las fronteras de la territorio español, como la noroeste de México, Baja California, el sur de Chile, parte este de Ecuador y Perú, y en Argentina, el noroeste de Argentina. So they came into the far northwest of Argentina to start out, and they were basically involved with the production of food and animals for the mines in highland Bolivia, or what was in those days called Alta Peru. Entonces los jesuitas en el noroeste de Argentina estaban cosechando cosas para comida, como azúcar, etc., y animales como vacas, caballos, mulas, etc., por las minas en lo que estaba en estos años Alta Perú, ahora Bolivia, como Potosí in Bolivia. So this is the map, a little bit closer map, around 1600, and the area that we're talking about is this area in here. This is highland Bolivia with Lake Titicaca. This is el Alto Perú, Bolivia, con Lago Titicaca. Y esta es la zona de Tucumán, Jujuy, Salta, etc., noroeste de lo que ahora es Argentina. This is the northwestern part of what is today Argentina, with cities like Tucumán, Jujuy, Salta. And the Jesuits arrived there and began to set up a series of missions. Those are going to be the first missions that we'll see. I'm going to show you just one example. Voy a mostrar solamente un ejemplo de una misión en la zona de Tucumán, Buenos Aires and Tucumán. Yo estaba la primera vez en Tucumán en 1970. I was there first time in 1970, and it just perchance that I happened to visit one of the Jesuit missions. So I have a couple pictures here from 1970. There's the mission that I went to. It's called San Jose de los Lules. Esa es la misión San Jose de Lules. Los primeros fotos aquí solamente sobre la agricultura en la zona de Tucumán con mucho caña de azúcar. It's a zone that has a lot of sugarcane, and I was actually there studying the sugarcane industry, not the missions. But so we visited several of the big sugar mills, and I showed you before when I was talking about Punta Arenas. I showed you some pictures taken in Punta Arenas and Valdivia by one of my former colleagues. He had been in this area in 1947, and so these are some of his pictures of sugarcane raising. Uno de mis colegas en 1947 estaba en la misma zona de Tucumán, ha tomado estas fotos de caña de azúcar allá. Pero Tucumán is there at the top. San Jose de Lules is just a few miles, un poco kilómetros al sur de la ciudad de Tucumán. Y casi no hay nada. There's just almost nothing there that's left. It was an example of one of these little mission ranches that the Jesuits set up. This is an air view from Google Earth. Desde el aire, here from the ground, desde la tierra, entrando. Y la misión es un poquito allá. It's pretty much in ruins. There's not much there. But it's an interesting little spot, an example of what was a series of missions here along the area of Tucumán that were raising the horses and the cattle and so forth for Potosí. Un ejemplo de, estaban varias misiones en esta zona por la comida en Bolivia, mulas and animales, caballos, vacas, etc. There's a little bit left, but not very much. The second area I want to talk very, very briefly is a bit away. We were just in Tucumán. Now I want to show you right around Cordoba. And again, near Cordoba, there were a series of missions that the Jesuits set up to evangelize in that area. Estuvimos en Tucumán, ahora Córdoba, y en la zona de Córdoba los jesuitas han construido varias misiones por trabajar con los indios en esta zona. Right in the center is Cordoba, and the one that I'm going to talk about is a mission called Alta Gracia that you can see there. And we'll look at it very briefly, but I'll point out that there are a series of other missions in this area, if I can remember where they are. San Agustin was down here. Santa Isabella was there. There's one, Jesus Maria is up there. So there were a series of missions. This, the one I'm showing you, is just one of many that were around Cordoba. And Cordoba was one of the centers of mission activity. It was the headquarters of the Jesuits in this area. There is a mountain range just to the west of the town or the city of Cordoba called the Sierra de Cordoba. Al oeste de la ciudad es este Sierra de Cordoba. And it's muy bonita zona. And La Pampa, in the region of the Pampas, it's one of the very few mountain ranges that exists on the Pampas. En the Pampas no hay muchos cerros, ese es uno de los pequeños. Cordoba is un poco al norte de este. The city of Cordoba is just a few miles north of Alta Gracia. The town is right against the Sierra. And it is one of the sites in Argentina that is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The town is fairly large. I would guess it's probably 25 or 30,000 people. And right in the middle of it, there is a reservoir that the Jesuits constructed for agriculture, for irrigation. Ese es un reservorio construido por los jesuitos para irrigar, para riego de la zona, por su agricultura. And there's the little reservoir, still exists. And this is the Jesuit church. La Iglesia Jesuita. There's the church again and the inside of it. And right next to the church, always there would have been a residence area for the Jesuit priests. Usually there were only 2 priests at each mission, but they would have a fairly large, nice residence. That's the residence. Residencia de los Jesuitos. And one of the reasons why I went to Altagracia a couple of years ago was not to see the mission, but because there is an interesting story in this town with Che Guevara. You may be familiar with the story at all. His family lived here. His father was a doctor working for the railroad. El padre de Che Guevara estaba un médico trabajando por la ferrocarril, y ellos han vivido en esta casa por 6 años durante el tiempo cuando la familia estaba viviendo en Altagracia. The house is now a little museum, and if you're at all familiar with Che Guevara, for various reasons, one of the things that you may know about him, or may be familiar more recently, is the 2004 movie of the Motorcycle Diaries. Así, gente no se conocen mucho de Che Guevara en su historia, pero muchas personas de Europa, de los Estados Unidos, saben de Che Guevara sobre el cine de Motorcycle Diaries de 2004. Esa es una foto en el Museo del Motocicleta, y en el museo hay el motocicleta. In actuality, he and one of his friends in 1951-52 went from Argentina all the way up to Central America, ultimately on to Cuba in this long viaje, a long trip. En 52, Che y un amigo fueron en este motocicleto desde Argentina hasta el norte, ultimately hasta Cuba. Most of what I'm going to talk about today are not the missions of Cordoba and Tucumán, but rather the missions of the Guarani. And I want to mention one other thing here before we talk about the Guarani. Yesterday when I was talking about the archaeology and geography of the far south, the Patagonian Tierra del Fuego, I mentioned that most of the Indians had been killed off. They literally had been exterminated by disease, by the soldiers and so forth. And so there are no full-blooded native Indians in Patagonia and the far south, Tierra del Fuego. On the earlier lecture on the Lake District, I mentioned about the Mapuche, and somebody asked a question to me, are any of the Mapuche still left? Did they get completely wiped out? There are lots of Mapuche left. If we count full-blooded and people who are mestizo or mixed blood but are still claiming to be Mapuche, in Chile and Argentina, there's about 1 million left. so they did not get wiped out. Alguien ha preguntado sobre los Mapuche en mi charla sobre la zona región de los lagos, y están más o menos 1,000,000 personas pura sangre y mestizos, más o menos 1,000,000 de Mapuche en Chile y Argentina, probablemente más o menos 900,000 en Chile y más o menos 100,000 en Argentina. It's about 900,000 in Chile and about 100,000 in Argentina. And those in Chile are very resistant to the government. They have created problems for the government. They still want to be very much independent, including when the Pope was in Chile last week, they burned a couple of Catholic churches in protest. En la semana pasada, algunos de los Mapuche han quemado dos iglesias contra la visita del Papa. Okay. The Jesuits were invited to come to the area of the Guarani, which encompasses a region that is today Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina, really, a little bit of Uruguay maybe, in 1609. And they went there and set up a series of missions. The first one was in what is today Paraguay, San Ignacio Iguazu. Here the word Iguazu means the major one. Los jesuitas estaban invitados hasta esta zona de Paraguay, Brasil, Argentina, un poco de Uruguay en 1609. Y ellos han construido varias misiones. La primera estaba San Ignacio Iguazu. Iguazu, la palabra Iguazu en la lengua guaraní indica grande, la mejor. Misión. Y San Ignacio es sobre San Ignacio es el fundador de los jesuitas. Obviously, Saint Ignatius is the founder of the Jesuit order. They established about 40 missions. We don't know exactly how many, but most authorities say 40. The problem is that some missions were founded, or they said they were going to found one, and it never was founded. Most of them changed locations several times, and sometimes they changed names and so forth. So there's some confusion. We don't know the exact location of many of the missions. Estaban más o menos 40 misiones fundadas por los jesuitas. Algunos se dice estaban fundados, pero en realidad probablemente no. Varias de las misiones han cambiado nombre o cambiado ubicación. Entonces las autoridades, los historiadores, etc., dicen más o menos 40 misiones en esta zona. Most of the missions on the far eastern side of this area changed location and moved west because of constant attacks by Portuguese. Casi todas de las misiones en el lado este de la zona ha cambiado su ubicación al oeste porque los portugueses, los gente de Brasil estaban constantemente atacando las misiones para hacer esclavos de los indios. These were essentially slave raiders. The term we use for those Portuguese people that were coming to attack the missions is banderiantes, which translates really as flag wavers. They were the people that were establishing Portuguese authority over an area, and they're essentially explorers and basically slave raiders. Usamos la palabra banderiantes, que están alguien que lleva la banda, pero estaban los exploradores, gente buscando los esclavos en esta zona. And today, 5 of these missions are well known and are identified as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, 1 in Paraguay, 1 in Brazil, and 3 in Argentina.